Consider the possibility that physics, since the time of Einstein, and Bible teachings may be on the same page. But how? Einstein tells us that measurements of time and space will be different for someone or something traveling much faster than we are. The Bible tells us that Earth's time and space are vastly different from God's time and space. These depictions are right there in the Old and New Testaments, and you can check them out if you'd like. Could there really be a connection between Einstein's proven theories and what the Bible has said all along? I hope this video helps you to see that connection. Consider that the Bible tells us in numerous places that God or God's glory is light. Science ignores this and other physical references as false or worthless. As an example, creation as described in the Bible is given little or no value by science and seen as an impossibility. Yet the scientific community fail to realize that based on their own science, biblical creation and science may be on the same page. This video will investigate and expand on this concept and show you ideas that you've probably never seen or heard before. I want to emphasize here that this video is not some attempt to justify God's existence with science. I will focus on a narrow subject matter and offer scientific arguments that will challenge evolutionist theories. In this video, we will examine how Einstein's fantastic yet proven and true relativity theories open a window into the world of understanding how God created a universe that is unbelievably huge to us, but very small to Him. We will take a look through this window opened by Einstein's science and see God and our universe a bit differently than before. Let's first look at Einstein's theories that he published from 1905 to 1915. He addressed gravity in his paper on the equivalence theory. This new theory was a radical departure from the widely believed cause of gravity developed by Newton centuries earlier. We know that Newton was a physics genius and gave us most of the physics laws and basic formulas still used today. However, even though he was correct about the effects of gravity, he was incorrect about the cause of gravity. That may seem like a radical statement to many of you because you were very likely taught in school of Newton's gravity and how the Earth's force pulls the apple to it, or how the Earth's force attracts the moon by its gravitational pull. As we will see here soon, Einstein changed all of that. The equivalence theory developed from what Einstein called the happiest thought of his life was when he imagined a worker falling from a tall building. Now, he imagined it, so it still could be a happy thought, right? He pondered whether this falling guy would feel gravity and came to the conclusion that he did not feel gravity when falling. If the falling guy watched the building on his way down, he might have thought the building was rising up relative to him instead of feeling the fall. It was like he was in a free fall, as can be imagined if an elevator cable broke and fell with someone in it. It's a typical nightmare, right? That person would feel the floor leave them and they would basically be floating in the elevator. Similarly, one could think of a person free falling or floating in space. Importantly though, Einstein quickly realized that if that person in space were aboard a rocket ship that was accelerating by a rocket engine at a force of 9.8 meters per second squared, not going to get any math here, then the rocket would have exactly the same effect on him or her as they would experience on Earth, since our gravity is measured at 9.8 meters per second squared. Einstein's eureka moment was when he realized that gravity is nothing more than acceleration. But where is this acceleration coming from? Did it mean that the Earth was accelerating, and if so, in what direction? He already knew the rate of acceleration of gravity, as known from 18th century scientists, was 9.8 meters per second squared. Einstein determined that the Earth was accelerating relative or in comparison to someone looking at Earth from space who just happened to be floating by. This imaginary person in space would have no forces acting on him or her while moving along, so would be scientifically deemed as an inertial observer. The term inertial in this context means that no external forces acting on them. So relative to the person free falling in space, is the Earth really accelerating? Yes, but why? We will answer that question in the next couple of minutes in this video. Oh, and just a quick note about that acceleration math, which sort of was math. For those of you not big on math, I get it. It isn't that difficult to understand. If we said that a car is moving at 10 meters per second, then that's easy to understand, right? Well, with acceleration, that car is going faster and faster every second at a rate of 10 meters per second per second. In other words, a car at rest starts gaining speed of 10 meters per second every second. So after 2 seconds, it's traveling at 20 meters per second, right? And after 3 seconds, it's traveling at 30 meters per second, and so on. In math, we would say the acceleration is 10 meters per second squared, instead of saying the acceleration is 10 meters per second per second. Hope that makes a little more sense now. Just a couple of years prior to his publication on gravity, Einstein published a paper on spatial relativity. This was really the beginning of the discovery of his genius and the discovery of many brand new concepts of how the world around us operates. Einstein's paper on spatial relativity drew from a suspected but unproven idea at that time that the speed of light is constant. Prepare yourself now for some mind-blowing stuff, because this is where the rubber meets the road. Einstein gave us incredibly important science breakthroughs other than his work on gravity. Other scientists at or prior to Einstein's spatial relativity theory may have thought the speed of light is constant, but that made no sense to them in their mathematics equations or in the physics world at that time. Yet Einstein was always ready to tackle previously unsolved issues. In some way, he forced himself to believe that the speed of light is constant. But if that were true, then he knew that other physical quantities thought previously and logically to be constant must be variable. Let's break this down quickly here to better explain. Consider two vehicles traveling toward each other. If both are traveling at 50 miles per hour, then the relative speed would be 100 miles per hour because you add the 50 miles per hour from both vehicles traveling toward each other. On the other hand, if we imagine two vehicles traveling at 50 miles per hour, but both are traveling side by side in the same direction, the relative speed would be 0 because you subtract the speed of one vehicle from the other when both are moving in the same direction. But with a huge amount of emphasis and importance here. Einstein said that there is no addition or subtraction when we look at the speed of light. In other words, the speed of light is constant. He would imagine someone traveling on a light beam going one way and another person traveling on a light beam going in the opposite direction. In other words, they're meeting each other. This logic and physics would tell us that their relative speed to each other is twice the speed of light, right? But Einstein said no. And if that's not bizarre enough, he also said that if two light beams are traveling side by side in the same direction, then their speed relative to each other would not be 0 as with the vehicles. But their speed relative to each other, even though they are traveling side by side, would still be the speed of light. What? How can that be, right? The speed of light does not operate in relative speeds like the speed of vehicles. Since Einstein knew that the speed of light had to be constant, he thought that the other physical quantities like space and time must be variable, depending on an observer's perspective. Einstein conceived that time and distance change if something is moving at high speeds relative to its surroundings. So if a rocket ship were moving at a large fraction of the speed of light and somebody was watching it from a distance, that person would be called an observer and would see a rocket ship that is, believe it or not, shorter in length than it would be if he or she saw that rocket at rest. This shortening effect is horizontal only, and it's due to the rocket's incredibly high speed. Added to this unbelievably strange phenomenon is the fact that the observer's clock would tick more quickly than a clock inside the rocket. Einstein said that time moves slower for the person inside the incredibly speedy rocket. We now call this time dilation and space contraction. I know. This is all too weird and counterintuitive, but folks, it's true. and it's an incredibly important step to understanding gravity, space travel, satellite positioning, speed and acceleration and orbits, which give us much of our technological advances today. And as if all this isn't astonishing enough, consider the consequences of Einstein's assertions. It would necessarily mean that if someone were to travel at or near the speed of light, then time would crawl to zero, or said in another way, at the speed of light, time stops. What? Also, horizontal space would shrink to zero, and that person in the rocket might see the entire universe more like an incredibly bright light. Well, soon after Einstein's works on gravity and spatial relativity were published, which completely changed how gravity was defined and how it functioned, physicists at the time all celebrated this new breakthrough in science and started to ditch the previously held causes of gravity as had been proposed by Newton centuries earlier, right? Well, no. Many, if not most, of the physicists at the time dismissed Einstein's new gravitational theories and berated him for his efforts. As we will see very shortly, Einstein published several other theories related to gravity, the effects of the speed of light, energy, and other previously unknown theories related to the physics of the universe. However, many fellow scientists still didn't believe Einstein's genius and correctness. This might remind you of how in modern times we hear of a new scientific theory that destroys the old previously held scientific theory. A recent example of this is when a subtropical rainforest was discovered under ice and the ocean floor in the Antarctic, when previously this was unthinkable. Yep, you heard me correctly. The climate in Antarctica was so warm at one point that a rainforest grew there. The temperature was likely at least 50 degrees warmer than it is today. I know, this is hard to believe, but you can easily verify this discovery by searching on rainforest in Antarctica. That's just one example of how sometimes we know so little about the world around us, but assume we know much more. So, should we put tremendous faith in science today when something like a rainforest in Antarctica was until recently thought to be impossible, or when scientists did not believe Einstein's published theories even though they were proven correct? Yes, a good deal of faith should be put in science. But it's possible that scientists today are incorrect when they claim that Mother Nature is the only possible answer to how we exist. Did a one-cell organism really create itself out of the muck and then think, oh, I should multiply? And then think, oh, I should gain intelligence so that I can think. But wait a second, didn't I have to think before I could think about the intelligence needed to think? Okay, I'll stop now. Now, if you're a Mother Nature only person or scientist, I may have upset you there. That is not my intent. My intent is to show that the evolution theory is not the only plausible scientific theory. As we will see here in the next couple of minutes, it is not impossible at all that the Bible's creation message is accurate. This might be a good time to recall the impossibility that there was a subtropical rainforest growing in the Antarctic in the past. That impossibility was thrown right out the window with the discovery that a subtropical rainforest did, in fact, grow there. Maybe we should be more open-minded when it comes to the matters about which we are not certain. It took Einstein several more years, nearly a decade in fact, to develop and publish a complete solution of how gravity operates throughout the universe, which is, of course, a consequence for all of us. Einstein published his work on general relativity, which introduced more of his ingenious ideas of how gravity functions throughout our solar system and the universe. Since the time of his publications, his theories, including general relativity and the equivalence theory, have proven to be true thousands of times over by others who wanted to prove or disprove his theories. After all, if a scientist disproved his theory, that scientist would be an instant rock star, right? His paper on general relativity is as astounding as it is accurate. Without the aid of any empirical evidence, like experiments that could be attempted in a lab or anywhere else, he showed that the world we live in does not operate like we thought, not by a huge stretch. He demonstrated that gravity is acceleration, as we previously shown, but moreover, it's really a function of a completely new concept of bent or curved space-time. Now, I can almost hear many of you saying, wait a second, this is going to make my brain hurt, and I just want to see a video on the God and Einstein connection. Please bear with me just a tiny bit longer because we are so close to the heart of the matter. Einstein proposed that space-time is not only variable, but also curves inward toward massive objects like the planets and stars. In other words, due to the extreme mass of a planet or a star like our sun, space and time are not constant but bend around those massive objects. To put it as simply as I can, when space and time bend, say for example when the sun's mass causes the space-time to bend around it while constantly affecting the Earth and other planets, that bend in space and time dimensions cause acceleration. Now, okay, it's a bit different than the example of acceleration that we saw earlier. Acceleration can be caused not only by the changing rate and speed in a linear direction like with the vehicles, but it can also be caused by a change of direction. Imagine a tire that is rotating and a nail is embedded in the tire rotating with it. The nail is constantly changing direction as the tire rotates. This change of direction is an acceleration, even though the tire may be spinning at a constant linear speed. So as we on Earth are traveling along this bent space-time, we are accelerating due to our change in direction, even though we are moving at a constant linear speed. Einstein developed field equations to measure the bending of space-time, and if you want to continue looking into the depths of general relativity, then you will want to study those equations too. So other than his field equations and other mathematics and concepts about general relativity, how did Einstein ever hope to prove his radical new ideas about curved space-time? Well, he proposed an experiment. His goal was to prove that the gravity of the sun was strong enough to cause the light from distant stars to bend around the sun. You heard me right. He wanted to demonstrate that the strength of the sun's gravity due to its enormous mass would cause light from the distant stars to curve or bend around it. He thought that the light from these stars would normally appear in their usual position in the sky unless the sun was between these stars and the Earth where, of course, the star's light was being observed. But he knew that because the light from the sun would not allow the star's light to be seen, that the experiment could only be conducted during a total solar eclipse, when the sun would be dark and the stars could be seen. If the stars could be photographed during a solar eclipse, then he theorized that the stars would be seen in a position that was different from their normal position in the sky due to the bending of the light around the sun. In fact, he presented a calculation of where exactly the stars would appear in the sky during this eclipse to show that the light from the stars was in fact bending around the sun due to the sun's extreme mass. Within a couple of years, the experiment was done, and photographs proved that Einstein's theory was indeed correct, and that the stars appeared in the sky exactly where he said they would appear after their light was bent by the sun. So, you might be thinking if space and time are curved or bent, then they are not linear and thus not constant. And yes, you would be correct. And if that's true, then a meter in length and an hour in time can measure differently somewhere other than on Earth? What? Yes. And you may also be thinking, how can this be true? Believe me when I say that everybody struggles with this concept when first introduced to it. It is counterintuitive and it's illogical. However, it is true, and it has been proven over and over again since the time of Einstein's paper on general relativity. Hang on a second, you might say. Isn't this video supposed to be about a connection between Einstein and God? Well, yes, but it's really a connection between Einstein's work in God. I don't know a great deal about Einstein's personal relationship with God. There's not much out there. That's a personal thing. He seemed to see God as a supreme being, someone or something that is the opposite of chaos. He thought there had to be someone or something that constructed order out of all the chaos. This is cool. When another famous scientist visited Einstein in his apartment and asked him, "Who built that model of that fantastic looking model ship over there on your desk?" Einstein replied that it built itself. This was Einstein's way of saying to his guest that his reply about the ship building itself was as ridiculous as someone saying that our universe built itself out of chaos. And since we are focused on the speed of light in this video, I must add that without light, there would be nothing but chaos in the universe. Einstein's work gets us a big step closer to understanding our world, and some say a world that was created by God. And yet, some of us really struggle with a belief in God because of evolution and how it conflicts with the creation told in the Bible. I mean, isn't it illogical that God created everything, including the earth and humans, in 6 days? How can this be, since we know that dinosaurs roamed the earth and experts claim that the earth is over 4 billion years old? Well, it turns out that the answer to these and many other questions may have been right in front of us all along. The Bible tells us repeatedly that God is light, or can be seen as light. The Bible also tells us that God's clock functions differently from our clocks. In 2 Peter 3:8, it says, "With the Lord, a day is like 1,000 years, and 1,000 years is like a day." All right, let me repeat that because it's incredibly important. With the Lord, a day is like 1,000 years, and 1,000 years is like a day. This verse tells us that there is no comparison of our time to God's time, that time differences don't correlate and they're irrelevant. Time passes differently in God's home compared to the passage of time here. If we look at what the Bible has to say about contracted space, Isaiah 66:1 says, "Heaven is my throne and the earth is my footstool." So, what does all this talk about God's time and space versus human time and space have to do with Einstein and physics? Well, quite possibly everything. Now, some of you might say this is ridiculous in several ways, but to name one, we know that some stars are thousands of light years from us, meaning it might take a light beam from that star 1,000 years to reach Earth. Looking at the speed of light this way ignores the concept that space shrinks for that light beam, and space becomes negligible at that speed. Remember what we just looked at. Not only is there an enormous effect on time at speeds near the speed of light, but there is also a tremendous space contraction. And now some of you can see where I'm going with all of this. The Bible tells us that God is light. God is omnipresent, meaning everywhere at once, and that God's clock ticks at a much, much, much different speed than our clocks tick. But does God really move at the speed of light? I realize that many of you think that God does not move. I know. Most of us likely think of God as being stationary. Maybe it will help to reduce uncertainty here by stating that most of us do not see light as moving either. Most of us see light as static, right? I am reasonably certain that throughout a vast majority of human history, we didn't even know that light was moving. Uncertainty is a natural reaction to new thoughts or concepts. It always is. If you want to believe that light and God are stationary, I guess that's okay. The goal of this video is to show that God lives in a different dimension from ours, one where time and space take on completely different meanings. As difficult as it may be to accept Einstein's theories about the speed of light and the fact that space and time change dramatically if someone were to approach that speed, it's all true. Consider that Einstein's papers were published over 100 years ago and gradually have been proven and true and accepted by NASA and the science community. Now, it's up to you as to whether to believe the Bible when it says that God is light and that God is omnipresent and that God's clock runs vastly different from ours. Einstein has laid the scientific groundwork for me to claim that if God is light, as the Bible says, and moving in all dimensions or at or near the speed of light, then 6 days for God could equal over 4 billion years of Earth time, or even 10 billion years, as the time differences are irrelevant. We orbit the sun at roughly 67,000 miles per hour and travel through the universe at many times that speed. And most of us don't even realize it, right? In God's dimension, where His speed may be much, much greater than ours, God would see the universe as something very small. I call this divine relativity. Humanity has naturally always viewed God with our perspective, with most of us giving very little or no thought to the completely and utterly different dimension where God lives. Because of the magnificent works of Einstein, we may have gained a glimpse into God's realm. I hope that I've given you some matters to consider. Thanks for watching.